Unfortunately, he was not able to continue, but he had that he still have that entrepreneur mindset. So I would like to invite Satyajit to present his knowledge, his findings, and what all he can share. Looking forward to have some mind-blowing stuff from him. So thank you, Satyajit. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Really appreciate it. All right. So let's get started. Gaurav, if you don't mind, could you share the screen?
Sure, I'm doing it now, right now.
All right. As a technical writer, we are writing for software products. To better write for the software products, it is important to understand how softwares are working, some knowledge around how softwares are developed. While doing our core work, we all have different style of writing, and we think this is the best approach. This is the major obstacle we need to overcome. Your approach can be based in one of the scenario, but the same approach may or may not be applicable in all of the scenarios. And that is the good thing, and that's we are going to focus on today. Next slide, please. All right. If you want to build a product that really excites your customer, then you have to rethink how to work together. Your team will want to adapt to, including continuing the age new features and immediately respond to customer feedback. That's why many teams are embracing an agile mindset. Today, we will discuss how to think like an agile team. You will see some kind of foundational concepts in the agile manifesto, along with the common roles and practices. Agile teams are more predictable, more collaborative, and usually more fun. So let's embrace our new mindset and start learning the agile foundations. Next slide, please. There is an old philosophy joke where two, two fishes are swimming in the ocean. One look at the other and says, "The water looks pretty cloudy today." The other fish looks back and says, "Yeah, but what's the water?" I love this joke because it shows that the way we do things often becomes part of our own reality. It's the water we are floating in without even thinking. We don't question the way we work. Instead, we think that the way we work is the only way that makes sense. But the way we work reflects a certain mindset. It might seem natural for you to have a set of skills that makes you a specialist. As a technical writer, maybe we only focus on these particular skills when we are working. It also might seem natural for you to only work on detailed plans. Otherwise, you might have costly rework. Yet the water we swim in is always not clear, right? So in fact, it might be more efficient to have generalists instead of specialists. Instead of having a few people who really know one area, it might make sense to have everyone know a little bit about everything. It also might make sense to focus on short term planning. So instead of focusing on eliminating rework, you are actually embracing uncertainty. Some of these ideas are now more commonly known as agile mindset, and that's how you should think of it, as a mindset. You are not just this is very important. You are not just focusing on a different way to work. Instead, you are focusing on a different way to think about working. I have read about many organizations that try to use agile to improve the product delivery. They might rename their project managers into scrum masters. Maybe they will break down the requirements into the agile user stories. All of these agile practices are fine, but on their own, they are not going to help you reach a higher level of productivity. To get the real benefit from agile, you have to start by addressing your team's mindset. You have to take a hard look at the reality of how your team works together. It's better to be a team that's terrible at agile practices but understands the mindset. A truly agile team should be able to ask tough questions about the way they work and be open to continuous improvement. If you see agile is just an updated set of project management tools, then you will be probably disappointed. You don't want your team to be focused on agile practices. Instead, you want to be focused on thinking like an agile team. That's why the first step is the focus on the why. When you look at these agile practices, don't think about mastering them. Instead, think about the reasoning behind them. For example, you may have heard about sprints. You will learn about the importance of delivering in shorter iterations, or what commonly known as sprints. These are typically 2 weeks long, but some projects can have it around 3 to 4 weeks, depending on their project needs. When you think of sprint, you shouldn't think of like how you are going to deliver a product in 2 weeks. Instead, think about the reasoning behind the sprints. Why do shorter sprints improve your team's agility? These kind of questions will help you so much more when you are trying to change your team's mindset. If you are just working the same way but in a shorter time frame, then you are not going to see much improvement. If you understand you are doing things differently, then you will be much better off as an agile team. So talking about the rise of knowledge workers, in the past, a lot of times you can learn everything you need to know by moving up the corporate ladder. Today, there are many ways that modern product delivery makes that much more difficult. So it's important to think of the agile mindset, not just as a new thing, but as a reaction to difficult challenges with typical product delivery. In the 1990s, many project managers recognized that they needed a way to deliver products in a new way. What they found out is that many of the people working in the organization had changed. These different employees started to specialize, and it was difficult to find a generalist who understood all the different specialists. For example, a database engineer might know a little bit about software development, but not enough to manage a team of developers. This led to a serious challenge in management. It puts project manager in a difficult position. They were responsible for delivering the product, but had very little knowledge on how to take key technical decisions. Software products had become much more complicated over a period of time. So it was like, so full stack developer cannot build the entire product because due to the complexity. Instead, now software structure specialist. For example, a modern software project manager who might manage a team with many different specialists, he may not have the entire areas of expertise, but he should have the generic idea like uh, whom should I reach out for this particular expertise. There is no way that one project manager could know all the different decisions that it takes to build a software product. They couldn't be a database engineer, technical writer, software developer, but even if they did, they wouldn't have the complete knowledge because of the ever changing technology. You can't direct a team of people who collectively know more about the product than anyone else in the management. So you have managers becoming less directive and more supportive. One of the key things that you see with the agile teams is they are self-organized. That's because it's difficult to manage the team with a top-down approach. So you shouldn't have one manager who is directing the team to deliver the product. Instead, you focus on having collective decision making. This is a very difficult change for most organizations. Many managers like to tell their employees what needs to be done, and they go and get it done for them. They might not be ready for a group of specialized knowledge workers coming up with their own plan and how to deliver the product. Now, coming up with the challenges with the software manufacturing, a lot of the ways we comes, a lot of the way we works comes out of manufacturing. Large companies build cars, roads, and buildings, but when you are working with wood and concrete, you have completely different set of challenges than when you are working with the software. You would never start a building a bridge and then change direction midway through the project, but with software that's much more common. It's easier to reprogram software than to then there is a change in the planning of building the bridge. So you cannot go for example, you have started the bridge and there should not be any change, right, in the direction or something, but it's happening with the software because requirements keep changing. So that mindset should be developed. That mindset should be developed because of the there should be change in mindset from manufacturing to the lean manufacturing side. It all makes sense a world of steel and concrete, but software is much more like science than manufacturing. When you are developing a software, you are doing a mixture of building and learning. As much as it's tempting to plan everything out, it's just too difficult to predict all the moving pieces. If you think about even a simple software product, it might depend on an operating system like Linux or Microsoft Windows or in something like that. Then it might rely on some different open sources projects. The language can be ever changing, and you cannot predict all of the changes, right? It's like impossible. This is one of the biggest challenge with delivering the software products. You know the most about what it takes to deliver the product only when you are nearly finished to the finished of the project. So many of the decisions that you take at the start of your project will be the ones that you need to change. Unfortunately, as you get closer to the end of your project, it also gets a little bit more expensive to make those changes. So you need to find a balance between making the minimum amount of decisions to get started, but still give yourself enough flexibility to make changes. This balance between making decisions and having flexibility to make changes is one of the key parts of the agile mindset. That way you can help make lasting decisions even when you are working within a cone of uncertainty. Um, could you please advance this slide, Gaurav? Yeah. Agile Manifesto. So there in Agile Manifesto, there are 4 values and 12 principles. To better understand the Agile mindset, you have to start by looking at the manifesto for Agile software development, or what's commonly called the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto is a set of statements of 4 values and 12 principles that are intended to help you embrace an Agile mindset. The first part of the manifesto outlines the values. It reads, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions, working software over comprehensive documentation. So perhaps this question might come in someone's mind, what about why they are prioritizing that or they devaluing that? It's not like that. It's just like they are putting that value because they feel everything should be in priority order. Delivering software should be priority. Documentation can follow. Then there is a customer collaboration or contract negotiation, responding to change over the following a plan. Please understand these are just the values. The manifesto also includes some principles. An agile team should have mindsets that consistent with the values and principles in the agile manifesto. So you can think of this as a guide for how to think about your work. To give you a little background, the manifesto was sketched out in a whiteboard back in February around 2001. It was part of a meeting with 17 middle-aged men in conference on the sky slopes in Utah. These developers wanted to find a way for large organizations to deliver software. They wanted to start a revolution against their organization's cumbersome development process. That's why they use language like manifesto and values. You don't usually hear words like that in a business meeting. None of these developers thought like you should give a planning and documentation. They just thought that organization needed to change their focus. Over the years, the Agile Manifesto has become a battle cry for organizational transformation. The manifesto is typically written on a whiteboard or posted on the wall of an Agile team shared workspace. It's important to keep in mind that these values are just designed to show you the bigger picture. I will repeat, it's important to keep in mind that these values are just designed to help understand the bigger picture. Taken at face value, they are not very actionable. Think about if your manager told you one morning that they wanted you to focus on individuals and interaction and less on processes and tools, right? You probably won't know where to start, but that's okay because the values are designed are not designed to be practical. They are just starting points to change the way you think about your work. Most organizations still prefer long-term plans and have very cumbersome tools and processes. So when starting your transformation, take a look back to the manifesto and see if these changes are consistent with the agile values. So the Agile Manifesto 12 principles. These principles are actually much closer to what people think about when they imagine agile development. It's in this principle that you start to see the first rumblings of common agile roles and practices. Principle 2 is about welcoming changes. Principle 3 and 7 refer to continuous software delivery in weeks as a measure of progress. That's why the most agile teams deliver in short iteration called sprints. Principle 4 describes how customers should work closely with the development team. Principles 5 and 11 talk about motivated self-organized team. That's why most agile teams are cross-functional and self-organized. There should be small teams of generalists that work together to deliver the product. That's usually a big change from how most organizations work or operate. Principle 6 describes the importance of face-to-face conversations. That's why many agile teams write user stories. Instead of writing out long requirement documents, these user stories encourage their team to have face-to-face conversations. It's like a sticky note that reminds you to have a future conversation with someone else in the team. Principle 1, 8, 9, and 10. Yeah. They start you to introduce to the idea of prioritizing the high value work. Finally, Principle 12 encourages the team to meet frequently to discuss process improvement. That's why most agile teams have a retrospective. Typically, it's at the end of every sprint. This is when the team has a face-to-face meeting to think of ways to improve their collaboration. As you can see, these manifesto principles really fill in a lot of value which was left to your imagination when we had only 4 agile values. That's why you should think of the values of the manifesto as bigger picture, but it's actually the 12 principles in the manifesto that starts to lay some of the groundwork for what your team will actually do to deliver the great products. Gaurav, could you advance the slide? All right, individuals and interactions. Multiple tasking is the opposite of focus. Why? You are working on everything at once, hoping to be more efficient. This trend is common in the workplace. Many job descriptions require the skill of multitasking in a fast-paced environment. If you have set amount of time and a set amount of tasks, then it just seems to make sense that you would want to work on them all at the same time. However, multitasking has a hidden cost. Think of your own experience. Maybe you were writing an office memo and suddenly got an email from your manager. So you stop writing the memo and you start reading the email, right? Then decided to jot a quick reply because you don't want to have a bad impression on manager. So when you went back to the memo, you probably had to take a few minutes to review where you left off. Then once you got writing again, there might be another email. Each time you switch between the tasks, you had to do a little bit of thinking to get back on track. Humans have a difficult time switching between work items. The transition period, the transition period for your brain to go from one task to another is called context switching. If you're a fan of rugby, you will be familiar with the term scrum. In scrum, all the players work together simultaneously to push the same ball closer to the goal. There is no multitasking, and instead everyone on the team is focused on the one ball. That's the same way all the members of a scrum development team work. When I say scrum development team, it involves not only the developers but also the QE, but also the technical writers, but also the PO. That's the package of everything. Simultaneously, like, they work on a small set of tasks. They work together in a short amount of time to move the product closer to the goal. The key thing to remember here is that, like, agile teams try best to avoid multitasking. Avoid work handoffs. Okay. One practice that you will see in almost every workplace is handing off tasks to different people. This is typically called handoffs for short. What usually happens is that you finish your work and then hand it off to someone else. So a software developer, for example, might finish some code and then hand it off to a tester to test the code. And similarly, you will be getting some kind of requirements for the technical writing. In larger organization, hands-off are so common that most people don't even think about it. It's simply accepted as the way to work. A lot of time get wasted waiting for someone else to finish their work. One of the challenges with hands-off is that it encourages large batches of work to go through the system. This is usually called the queue size. If you have large batches of work going through the system, then people are going to process these batches at different speeds. This relationship between how these batches of work decrease your overall efficiency is not always easy to show. If you can keep your batch sizes smaller, it will be much easier to limit your handoffs. That will keep the traffic on your team running smoothly. So there is one activity for you guys. Don't worry, not now. You can just note down the name, the penny game. Right after this session, maybe you can just explore what the penny game is. I am sure like you will have the excellent takeaways from that one. All right. I hope you have noted this name, the penny game. Deliver at predictable pace. One of the key ways that agile teams deliver is that they try to work at a predictable pace. You will see this in the principle 8 of the manifesto. Agile processes promote sustainable development. So the team predictable has been used as a shorthand for sustainable and constant. But what does it mean to deliver predictably? The key is to make sure that you are breaking down the work into smaller batches. Typically, an agile team will write user stories to represent this batch of work. Then at the beginning of each sprint, the team will commit to delivering a few of those batches. This is often called the sprinkle. Principle 3 in the Agile Manifesto suggests that you should deliver in a shorter time scale. That means that every 2 weeks, the customer can expect to receive all of the user stories in the sprinkle. Now, I am using a lot of terms from Scrum because Scrum is the most popular Agile framework. Later on, we will discuss how Scrum is different from the Agile mindset. So for now, just remember that you can use many Agile practices to predictably deliver small batches of work in a short iteration. Traditional waterfall project planning uses the opposite processes. Traditional project prioritize creating long-term plans first, with project milestones that can be pretty spread out. The customer might have to wait for a couple of months or even years to get a glimpse at prefer predictability over long-term planning. Imagine that you are in a leadership role in a large software company. Over time, you will probably recognize that plans are not guarantees. Many projects are late or go over budget. Some projects are even cancelled, which is a huge waste of time and money. So these executives will prefer predictable delivery over a well-planned project. One thing you might be wondering is how you can deliver a large software project without planning. But you have to remember that planning and delivering are two different things. If most of your long-term plans don't work out, then you should question the value of long-term planning. Besides, agile team don't eliminate planning. They are just trying to eliminate long-term planning. In fact, agile teams spend a good deal of time deal for planning the all of the project, but it's not for a long term. They just try to focus on short term plans every 2 weeks, which we usually call the sprints, as we discussed earlier. So in the end, many executives and customer prefer short term predictable delivery over long term plans with an uncertain outcome. Talking about cross functional teams, you may have heard this terminology a lot in corporate, right? An agile team usually should be cross functional. A cross-functional team has each team member working horizontally through different functional areas. That means that you might have software developers that help you write requirements or documentation. You might have QE or tester people who are also developing software. Each people focuses on the work and not on their own functional role. So cross functional teams spend a lot of time cross training. That means that everyone spends a little amount of time training and learning. It's nearly impossible to have everyone on the team equally skilled in all the function areas. But agile team should try to have everyone good enough to be able to contribute something to every bit of work onto the team. If you have work if you have work that only one person can complete, then you will create more backups and hands off, as we discussed earlier. These experts needs to train the other people on the team so you can be sure to continuously deliver at a predictable pace. In short, we are creating the backups. Talking about user stories are another area that is getting a lot of attention nowadays. Product owners like have anxiety around creating the best possible user stories. This is especially true for product owners who were once business analysts. A business analyst spends a lot of time writing the clearest possible project requirements. That's because clear requirements will cause less problems down the road. But user stories are completely different. There is a form and format to the stories, but this is not nearly as formal as project requirements. A user story is more like a placeholder for a future conversation. So user stories aren't about getting the right format. They are much more about having the right conversations. That being said, there is still a common format for user stories. Typically, it's a as a user, I want some feature so that I can get some value. I will repeat. User stories have some common format. As a user, I want some feature so that I can get some value. So you might have user story that says something like, for example, just as a restaurant owner, I want to be able to put my menu online so that people will be interested in my restaurant. Remember that the format of the user story forces the product owner to think about the customer value. It's the last line of the story that's adding value, right? You also might notice that there is nothing here about functionality. The restaurant owner doesn't talk about upload buttons or databases or the documentation. They just care about the value. In this story, they want to encourage people to come to the restaurant. So that means the product owner should have a future conversation with the team to deliver that value. In Scrum, this is often called the difference between the what and the how. The product owner worries about what the customer wants, and the development team decides how to deliver it. Now, there is nothing in the Agile manifesto that says the team needs to work off user stories. There is also nothing in Scrum that mentioned user stories. The user story is just a popular way for the team to communicate and stay focused on value. The most important thing to remember is that user stories are not just an agile version of requirements. I see a lot of product owners get into trouble by taking a requirements document and breaking it down the user stories. Remember that requirements are designed to limit the conversation. A good requirements document will be very clear and tell the developer and the entire team what exactly needs to be done. User stories are a note to have a future conversation. It's designed to show it isn't designed to show the answer. Instead, it helps the team to ask the right and tough questions. Sometimes agile teams will come up with a better way to deliver value, one that the customer even haven't thought of. While doing this, there are some kind of common challenges that we are facing while doing the user stories that we'll discuss now. User stories aren't required in agile, but many teams still have them. Your story should contain a clear value statement and it should be written from the perspective of the user. Still, When teams are starting out, they will usually have a few common challenges. For example, the example that we took earlier of the restaurant, we'll just expand that one. As a restaurant owner, I want to able to print out, email, and text my reservation list so that we know how many people to expect. I will repeat it once again. As a restaurant owner, I want to able to print out, email, and text my reservation list so that we know how many people to expect. This story isn't independent. It has a long list of value statements. So it's really kind of three stories imbibed in one. This would make it very difficult to estimate and deliver. So let's take a look at another one. As a customer, I want an email copy of my receipt so I can have it on my own phone. This story doesn't have a clear value statement. It doesn't say why the customer might value a copy on their phone. So the agile team won't have the flexibility to find the best way of satisfying the customer. Maybe they want a copy so they can order the same thing next time. Maybe they are keeping track of their expenses. We don't know. So because it's not clear, right? The team would want to know these values so that the team should know this value because they can better deliver the product. You should watch out for these common pitfalls when working for your user stories. Like many things, your team will usually get better at writing the user stories with practice. Work closely with your product owner to make sure they take the time to write clear stories with a simple value statement. All right. Gaurav, next slide, please. All right. Delivering working software. Start with the highest value. So, what does it mean to prioritize high value software? Strangely enough, one of the answers to this question starts in the 19th century. It's long back, right? With an Italian economist named, what I remember is Pareto. When he was in his garden harvesting peas, he noticed that 20% of his pea pods produce 80% of his peas. He was an economist, so he compared this ratio to the wealth distribution in Rome. There he saw that 20% of the population owned 80% of the city's land. That's a huge number, right? So this 80 to 20 ratio is now known as the 80 is to 20 rule or the Pareto principle. 80% of the effects come 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. I will repeat. 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. Now, if you are fast forward to the 1990s, a consulting company called the Standish Group published a report that said that the majority of software projects were failing. Huge risk, right? Most of the software projects are failing. That's because they spend too much time working on software features that no one will use. Think of it this way. If you use a small program like Microsoft Word, let's say, you might really be using only a set of small features into that one. Maybe you will use spell check, print, or copy and paste, but you might never use mail merge or any of the hundreds of language packs, right? That's true with the most software products. In fact, the report showed that for most customers, 13% features are often used and 7% are only used or always used. Then what about the other features, right? They are just mostly futile. If you look closely, you will see the Pareto rule. Only 20% of the product features are often or always used. So if you are working in an agile team, this 20% is the most valuable part of the software. I will repeat. So if you are working in an agile team, this 20% as per the Pareto rule is the most valuable part of the software. So you would want to start here first. This would be part of the highest priority feature delivered in the very first sprint. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, but it's actually different from how most teams develop software, prioritize and track. All right. So you have seen how important it is for agile teams to prioritize high value work. They need to first focus on the features that the customer will always use. Then once these features are complete, they can move on to some of the less valuable or lower priority work. One way that these agile teams help visualize this work is by creating something called a task board. A task board is a simple swim lane diagram. The reason it's called a swim lane diagram is because it has a vertical columns that look a little bit like a swimming pool. Now, each of these columns or swim lanes holds a small batch of work. Typically, we call these as task, right? Jira is a good example here. Whichever column the task is in, like it shows the status of that task. The simplest task board would only have three columns: the to do, which you are going to take now, the doing one, or you may call this in progress, and the third one might be done or complete. You should keep in mind that many agile teams use the task board incorrectly. They will just start whatever they are comfortable working on and move it across board. Now remember that the task board is not just a way to show what you are working on. Instead, it's a key part of verifying that the team is working on the highest value features. While doing that, we need to avoid the PowerPoint software. Now, what exactly I mean by that one? One of the things that a lot of agile teams get tripped up is the idea of delivering a high value working software. But how is it possible to deliver working software every few weeks, or rather, I would say? To do that, you need to deliver small, fully functional features of the product to the customer in iterations or sprints. Let's think about developing a simple website. We just want a web form that captures the customer's contact information and stores that in a database. If you think about it, that's a whole project, and there are several possible milestones. For the first milestone, you need to create the database. Then you might need to develop the software that connects the form to the database. Finally, you have to create the form that captures the information. You might also need extra code to make sure that you have the correct data in forms. So if you are looking at the website as a project, then you can imagine it having a lot of milestones. But an agile team doesn't think about software as a project. Instead, it thinks of it as a product that has prioritized value that you deliver to the customer in short sprints. So you're not trying to tackle everything at once. I will repeat. So you are not trying to tackle everything at once. Remember, we are not multitasking. So you might have a simple web page that just captures the customer's first name and email address. The key thing to keep in mind is that this form would be fully working software. That means that if you submitted your first name and email address, this simple website would check to make sure it's right, capturing your the email address and the name and storing it to the database. Now, not many customers would accept this as a fully working product, but they could. That's why when you're working on an agile team, you want to only show the customer working software. Some teams make this mistake of showing the customer power PPT presentation or wireframes, but these are just fictitious, right? They are not working software the customer that customer can use. Ideally, at the end of every sprint, the customer could put the software into production and end the development. All right. Next slide, please. To work well as an agile team, you had to be adaptable. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Embracing change and inspecting and adapting are really two ways of doing the same thing. Your product might depend on operating systems or networking protocols that are always being changed and updated. So these teams started to think of software development as much closer to scientific experiments. Embracing change also gives the customer a lot more flexibility. An agile mindset allows the team to pivot. That's the most important thing. To take advantage of the new information so that customer is more likely to be satisfied with the final product. While doing this, the Agile Manifesto points this in the principles 3 and 8. It said that agile teams deliver working software frequently with a preference for the shorter time scale. Now also remember that your team need to be able to experiment, change, while at the same time delivering frequently and indefinitely. Agile teams should be very aware of time. You can't have meetings that go over schedule or brainstorming sessions with an uncertain outcome. That's because your team has a deadline every few weeks, which we already discussed as a sprint. That's also why agile teams are very structured with their time. Typically, they will use the term time box. This is like a box of time that we cannot expand. That means that if your meeting is scheduled for 45 minutes, for example, then the meeting will end in 45 minutes. Whatever team decides within that time box will be the final outcome. Think about how many times you are in a meeting and nothing gets decided. Usually what happens is like project manager or some supervisor will schedule another meeting. That would never happen with an agile team, because if you take that time away for another meeting, then you can put the team in danger of not delivering within that sprint. Now, a time box is more than just about meetings. Each person on an agile team has their own personal time box. They shouldn't work more than 8 hours a day. If team members start putting in overtime or working over the weekends, then it can interfere with the team's predictability. This extra time isn't considered a sustainable pace. If you just need an extra day to finish the documentation, then you have to take that feature out of the sprint. Keep in mind that you need a time box to deliver predictably. You can't commit to a delivery date if you have too much work, or if your meetings go long, if everyone is working overtime. Jumping off the waterfall. If you work for a large organization, then you might hear the term waterfall or stage gate release. Here each step falls into the next, like a waterfall. In the 1970s, a computer scientist named Winston Royce took this waterfall model and reworked it to make it work with the software. The first stage is kind of gathering the requirements, then analyzing the requirement, design the system, code, and then deploy it. Many agile coaches feel that waterfall and an agile mindset are complete opposite, but the truth is little trickier. Remember that agile is a mindset. It's a way to think about your work, while waterfall is a concrete process. It's strict guidelines for how you should do your work. Many large organizations prefer strict guidelines over a new way of thinking. So you will almost certainly bump onto times when waterfall practices are inconsistent with your agile mindset. It's just that instead of working on things in sequential phases, you will have the whole team working on these things all at the same time within a sprint. If you think about it, it would be nearly impossible to deliver every few weeks if you are using a waterfall style approach. If the PO or business analyst got stuck waiting to hear from the customer, then the rest of the team would just sit idly and just wait for the entire development to start off. That's why many agile teams try to be cross-functional. When you work as a cross-functional team, you are not as vulnerable to these backups. The PO or the product owner on the team will give you all the user stories you need to keep working. So just think of an agile team as accomplishing many of the things as you do in waterfall, but they are just doing it in a cross-functional way and compressing all the phases into a few weeks. While doing this, we should commit to the sprint. The term sprint is from Scrum, which is the most popular Agile framework. Now, there is nothing in the Agile manifesto that says that a team should deliver in sprints. In principle 3, yeah, in principle 3, the manifesto only suggests that you should deliver working in a shorter time scale. For now, let's just think about some of the Scrum events. These are the different things that happen over the course of your sprint. On the very first day of your sprint, you will have a sprint planning meeting. Now listen to this very carefully because it will have the complete most of the Scrum overview, right? On the very first day of your sprint, you will have sprint planning meeting. This is the time when your team will plan out all of your work you want to finish in the next few weeks. This shouldn't be more than a 2 hour meeting. The key thing to keep in mind is that this is where you do all of your planning. Remember that Agile's team don't eliminate planning, they just focus on short term planning. Every morning, the Scrum team should stand up for its daily Scrum. This can be a 15 minutes meeting where the team coordinates their work. This is primarily a meeting among the team members about the progress they are making on to the product. At the end of the sprint, the team will have a sprint review. This is a 2 hour product review so the customer can offer any feedback on the work that was done during the sprint. Usually the last hour and half of the sprint is dedicated to a team retrospective. This is when the team reflects on how they can better work together. Now, as you can see, there is a lot of stuff happening in this short sprint. You cover a lot of the waterfall pages that you have in a long-term project. You will plan in sprint planning, then analyze during daily scrums. You will deploy in your sprint review, and then you will use some time for process improvement. It's certainly possible to be an agile team and not work in sprints. I will repeat. It's certainly possible to be an agile team and not work in sprints. But sprints have become very popular because they have a great structure for delivering a product in a much shorter time frame. Iterative delivery. One of the biggest changes for agile teams is delivering the products in iteration. These are usually called sprints. Iterative delivery is a process on its own, but you can really think of it as more as a refinement. The team is improving on the product, and at the end of sprint, and at the every sprint they are improving. Imagine you wanted to build a car using a typical water style phased approach. So basically what you will do, you will have the gears, you will have the steering wheels, you will have the brakes and everything like that. But as an agile team, what you can do is you will focus on the value here. So instead of directly going for the car, you can start also with the skateboard. You can go with the motorcycle in the sprint to sprint basis. So for example, the value is the transportation here. The customers want the transportation, but they give the proposal for the car. But as an agile team, you can think differently. You are proposing the value. Might be they will go on to the motorcycle. That's solving the problem. So this is how the agile team is different from the normal teams that we are looking into. All right. Next slide, please, Gaurav. Gaurav, next slide, please. Yeah. All right. The Scrum overview. So far, you have heard me use terms such as the product owner, sprint, Scrum master, and the product backlog. These are common terms that you will hear the most while working with the agile teams. But these terms are not part of the agile manifesto. These terms are actually from Scrum, which is the most popular agile framework. The developers of Scrum were a part of the group that helped write the Agile manifesto. But the manifesto doesn't prescribe Scrum. In fact, it goes out of its way to generalize Agile methods into a larger mindset. So Agile is a mindset. Agile is a mindset, while Scrum is a way to help you embrace that mindset. Think of it this way. A lot of people like to be physically fit. So they jog or swim or take long bike rides, right? Bicycle rides to be precise. These are all different ways that you can achieve better fitness. You can even improve your fitness by mixing and matching some of these methods and doing something completely different. Agile like fitness is a mindset, while jogging and riding bicycle are methods you can try to help you embrace that mindset. Scrum and Agile are basically doing the same thing. Agile is a mindset, while Scrum is a framework. Another popular framework for Agile teams is extreme programming. The creators of extreme programming or XP were also part of the group that wrote the manifesto. Some Agile experts believe that most of what team thinks of as an Agile actually came from the XP. XP allows software teams to work quickly and embrace changes. These teams can quickly pivot to take advantages of new information. They called the methods extreme because they thought to deliver software effectively. You needed to make extreme changes to the software development process. At first glance, Scrum shares a lot of the same ideas as extreme programming. In fact, the very first Scrum book said that you should use Scrum to implement XP. But Scrum took a slightly different path. It broke away from XP and became a much looser framework that you could use with any product. XP is still focused on software development. That means if you are in an agile software development team, you should probably consider using many of the XP practices. A few of these practices are like agile planning, continuous integration, software refactoring, test driven development. Most agile teams already use some form of XP's agile planning, and most popular one is the agile user stories. So a customer might create a user story that says something like, I want the user to be able to input their address. You can see that this is not isn't technical. You don't talk about documentation or a database or anything like that. And XP team isn't satisfied when the software is finished. They always look to improve the code through constant refactoring. Finally, XP teams try to create test for their software before they actually start development. I will repeat. XP teams try to create test for their software before they actually start development. This is called the test driven development, or TDD, TDD, and it helps developers understand how the software will work before they actually start coding. So in a sense, they will know how.
Hello, Satyajit. Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. I just wanted to say that we need to start with the Q&A because
Okay,
we are ahead of time. Yeah.
cool. Just give me 5 minutes. I will wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Yeah, sure. Let's
Sure.
start soon.
Sure. Sure. So yeah, that's why many software teams use a combination of Scrum and XP to help them embrace an agile mindset. Talking about the Kanban, you can think it as a lean manufacturing. Um, it is using the process of lean manufacturing. Lean thinking is about focusing on what's valuable to the customer and then continuously improving the product over time. Remember that agile teams focused on continuous delivery of valuable software, but lean also emphasizes people over processes. Next slide, please. So these are the common roles on the team. So you might be wondering like why we didn't discuss these roles at the initial stage. It's because if you are not aware about the agile mindset, so you shouldn't be, you may not be having the entire glance, like and you will be mixing the entire terminology. So the product in owner is something who will be prioritizing the work, who will be working closely with the develop customer. So the, and he will be entirely owning the product. The scrum master is more kind of a into the training role, so he will be responsible for coaching the team members and bringing out the best from them. So it's kind of, he will be protecting his team members and responsible for the deliverables. Combat group thinking. So if you, for example, in a group of 10 members, you are having the two experts sitting with you and they are giving some kind of suggestions. So you are, and the entire 8 people are agreeing because two are experts, so it will be into the combat group thinking, because agile team will be focusing on to the collective decision making. Planning poker. So whatever the work you will be doing, you will be estimating that work, and that work usually will be into the Fibonacci series. So that usually is called the story pointing. So it's kind of 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and 21. So you will be estimating the effort needed for the task needs to be done. Next slide, please. Starting an agile transformation. So you can see, as you start this journey, you will be having a lot many questions and lot many resistance from the employees to have the agile mindset. But you need to, whatever we have learned today, so we need to embrace that mindset and try to have that into the organization, and you can be a vocal voice for that one. So it's not a short term process, it will be a long term. So it may take, if we start now, it may take 5 to 10 years from now to have the complete agile mindset for the for your team. Next slide, please. So yeah, the mindset is a radical change from how most organizations operate. What you feels right as an individual might not be most efficient way to work as a team. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Questions? Interesting. Yeah, please feel free to unmute and we can discuss.
So I guess we have a question from Manshi.
Hi,
Hi.
Satyajit. So the question was that since we are focusing on delivering the highest value features, like 20% of the features in initial phase of the project, so will that not deter customer, or maybe he may think that my task is over now because I have got the best set of features in the initial phase of the project itself. So does it somehow put our project on risk? Is this anyway a risk?
I would say no, because you are as the agile manifesto says, like priority is the most high value. It's not like in one sprint you are not going to do have the complete 20%. So it's kind of maybe only 0.1%, 0.1% of that you are delivering in one sprint. And as you are progressing, you will see the incremental changes that you are getting. So once you have that 20%, you can focus on the next level, which is of low priority. So for example, it's not only the entire product will not work only on the P1, right? It will include P1, P2, P3, P4, right? So
Yeah.
all is important, but major, for example, if you are running any startup, so or any organization, there will be one product who is giving the maximum revenue, but they are not abandoning the other product that are giving the less value to them, right? Because it's the complete package that is making that company.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, clear. Thanks.
Satyajit, Gaurav this side. I have a question. So with the advancements in the AI world that we are seeing currently, do you think it will have any kind of impact on agile methodologies or the thinking, because nowadays most of people use AI just to complete their work and it is becoming efficient by the day. So do you see any impact on agile thinking, and what is the way going forward for the agile thinkers as such?
To be honest, it's a agile is not a work, is the way we think, and AI is also part of that. So we cannot say agile and AI are competitive. It's kind of to have that agile mindset. AI is helping us. Does that make sense? Because agile is a mindset which is continuously improving, and AI is one of the ways that is helping us to embrace that mindset.
Got you. Yeah. Thank you. So anyone else, if you have any question, please feel free
Yeah, hi
to
Satyajit,
ask.
Samyak here.
Yeah, hi,
Um,
Sunil.
so, so basically, you said not to use the PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but rather to showcase the customer the small chunk of work that you are doing. But if you don't showcase the customer, what would be the output or what is the roadmap of the product? Then how that small chunk of milestone you will determine. So so what are the other way you will showcase to customer that this is going to be the outputs and these are the small chunks of work that we are doing as part of sprint 1, sprint 2, likewise. So if you don't use PowerPoint, what are the other tool you'll use?
Okay. So the ideal way here will be whenever usually there is a 3 month planning, which is the ideal way, which is in which the entire product backlog is done. At that time, maybe PPT is a good for showcasing because it's kind of blueprint. But when you actually have all of the requirements and when you start working onto that one, you the focus is to show the working software. So let's say before gathering the requirements, blueprint or the PPT is good, but when you started the working on into the sprints, so for the sprint one, let's say for example, if you are creating any website, you can just show we have the um, input tab for the name and email address. So that piece is also good, and but it should be working. That's what the agile manifesto is trying to say us. It should be working software rather than showing again. You cannot show again the PPT like we are still in progress. That's why we have the sprints to have the deliverables on time. And in, for example, in next second sprint, you can have the database connected to the in that one. For third sprint, you can have the complete package of to that one. So similarly, it's kind of incremental approach that we need to follow as an agile team.
Okay, thank you. And is it the standard way of doing planning? As you mentioned, 3 months of work we plan all together. Is it a standard way of doing for in Agile or in Scrum framework? What is the specific framework that we follow? I mean to say,
That is good.
if someone is not following SFE framework, scalable agile framework, then still they want to do that 3 months of planning.
No, it's not a hard and fast rule. It's good to have based on the experience that I have. So as I said, agile is a mindset, but you can have different ways to embrace that mindset. So you can have a 2 months of planning also, but let's say 2 weeks of sprint is an ideal one. That's what most companies prefer. But you can have 3 week sprint or 4 week sprint also. So it will vary.
Okay, so you mean to say if someone is planning for 3 months, they will
3 months
have a
cannot be the sprint. 3 months cannot be the sprint. It's kind of backlog planning that you will be doing. That will be the high level picture of what exactly um, features you will be delivering. But you in sprints you will be focusing on to the stories rather than the features. That small stories will make up the complete feature.
and who is not using 3 months of planning?
This is the best decision taken by the product owner based on the needs and the discussion he's having with the customers. So he will be the best because it will be completely context based, right?
No, I'm like my question is like if someone is not using 3 months of planning, then like how they're going to plan in before every sprint?
Yes, sprint planning should be the best case here.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Satyajit. And Samyak, if you have any additional questions, I believe you can reach out to Satyajit offline as well. Anyone have any additional questions before we call this session off?
Gaurav, Puneet here. So just one question. I mean, very nice explanation, Satyajit. I mean, agile framework and all that's really commendable. One thing I was just wanted to understand in terms of audience, basically, because most of the people here are technical writers. So, and you are also working that perspective. So maybe in your organization or somewhere. So this agile mindset, okay, setting up 3 months planning and everything is fine. But we also know that technical writers are not the person who said this, right? The 3 months framework, as you said, product managers or whomsoever are the leaders of that. They set it. We just have to plan our stuff accordingly. So in that perspective, the agile mindset that you have told us. So do you have a real life scenario to, just share where how using this, how was the situation before and how using this, it has helped the technical documentation team or the writers?
Cool. Yeah, I have that one. All right. So after planning, you will have the complete idea of what backlogs or the features that you will be working on. To be precise, product backlog. So in sprints, you will be working with the software development team, who will be the developers, POs, QE, technical writers. The product owner will create the subtask, which one will be assigned to the devs, one will be assigned to the QE, one will be assigned to the technical writers. So once you have the entire requirements gathering, the developer will start working onto that feature. While at the same time, he will also pass on the information or knowledge to the QE as well as the technical writers. And also the UX design team is also there. So in Miro board, or they will have some kind of design which will help the developers to work on to that one. So as an agile team, you are working all together cross functionally. So UX team will have the designs which will help the developers. Developers will pass that information to the QE as well as the technical writers. QA will start writing the test cases. Technical writers will write the doc analysis, as well as they will have some kind of draft documentation for that one. So once the code is out for review, the technical writers are also reviewing that draft document with the QE as well as the developers, and simultaneously they are also raising the PR and doing the documentation. So all of these things are going simultaneously. That's how technical writers are also coming into the picture, because we are working cross-functionally rather than in silos.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yes, that's the way technical writers work. Okay. But that where you are coming from is like, okay, tasks are assigned, somebody is assigning product managers and all. At the same time, what we promote is technical writers should be proactive here. Instead of waiting for people to be provided tasks, they should go and grab, because technical writers are also supposed to be part of all this agile process right from sprint zero, okay, where the planning works. So now tasks are assigned or they create tasks, that's a different story. But then what about the documentation plan? Like dev has a plan which they complete, right at the beginning, the plan is ready. QA has a plan. Every team shares their plan that in each sprint, what they will do at the end of the project, what they will be doing. So in the same way, doc team. So doesn't all that come into picture? Because if we just talk about tasks, then it's like a worker. Technical writers are working. What's the use of agile mindset then?
Obviously, that will come into picture. Maybe I have missed that mentioning that. Okay. Uh, when there is the 3 months of planning, at that time, the representative from the technical writer team is also like document program manager. He's also part of that one. So he will be having he will be making some kind of plans, like as you mentioned, into the Confluence or what are the tracking tools they are making. And this will be kind of cross-functional team meeting, like the entire one. Once the DPM or the CS or the content strategists have the complete idea of to that one, they are also passing that information to their respective technical writers. So that's how the cross-functional teams and the technical writers teams will work.
Great. Thank you so much, Satyajeet.
Thank you so much, Puneet.
Uh,
Thank you.
Yeah,
I have one more questions. Can I?
yeah, sure.
Okay. So, like basically, you mentioned that planning that maybe 3 months or maybe before the sprint. So, if
Mm.
someone like when we all together are planning, if
Mm.
how we decide that how much work we can take, like as you said that priority wise we decide prioritize is that is done by the PO, but he may prioritize maybe 100 of stories, right? So how
Mm.
you decide that in this 3 months of work or maybe 2 weeks of work, this
Mm.
much work we can do? How you decide that? That's one. And second is
Mm.
in all this discussion, how technical writers are useful, like how they give their importance.
Cool. For the first question, the answer is team's velocity. So when you're working into the sprints, so for example, you are 5 members team, and usually you will be getting the team's velocity, like how much story points or how much value they can deliver into one sprint. So that way the CS and DPM are aware about that one. And similarly, for example, if the team is getting burnt out or overwork, they can for sure discuss with the PO, like this much amount of work we can deliver in this sprint. Um, or else we might need some additional resource to do that one, but that's not a good way. So you need to do what's best with the existing team. And for the second question, and I'm sorry, I forgot your second question. What was that?
So yeah, it's like in all this discussion, how technical writers they get involved
Yeah.
basically.
Right. So once at the initial, like as I mentioned, 3 months plan. So there, all of the team members are also included into that one, along with the developers and QE. So that's how they are also contributing. So it will be, as I said, we are not, as an agile mindset, we are not treating ourselves as specialists rather than a generalist. So we are not only focusing on technical writing, but also we are trying to understand how like developers are coding, as well as how QEs are also writing their test cases. So that's how we are adding the value. And when POs are communicating with us, terminologies which is understandable to the technical writers also. And in that 3 months of planning, there can be um, like as I mentioned, like planning poker, right? So there you can have the estimate. So there usually have the t-shirt size estimation. So the, for example, a PO has mentioned one feature. So in that feature, it should be in a simple way, like developer also should understand, PO should also understand, QE also should understand, technical writer should also understand. And after that one, they can also make their points. It's not like if someone expert is giving their feedback, everyone should be aligned with that one. Instead, there should be collective decision here.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Satyajit. I guess we don't have any other questions. If you have, please feel free to raise your hands. I know it's overtime. Okay, so you can contact Satyajit offline as well. And I think it's over to you, Puneet, for the last words if you have any.
Yep. So thank you so much, Satyajit. It was really good to know all those details. I'm sure people will be, finding it very useful and try to implement it from this perspective. And yes, agile mindset, as you have mentioned, of course, it needs to be there, especially in technical writers. Yeah. So thank you so much, Satyajit, and thank you, Team NCR.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you all.
Have a great day.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.